All right, music fans, welcome. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there, just like you and just like me. So, Steven Van Zant, you know him from the E Street Band and his solo career, and he's got like some kind of radio show, syndicated show, which quite honestly is probably a lot more lucrative than trying to make records these days. Am I a fan of Steven Van Zandt? I don't know. Yes, no. I prefer the Southern rock Van Zants, like Donnie Van Zant, Ronnie Van Zant, and of course Johnny Van Zant, who is I guess still the current lead singer for Lynyrd Skynyrd. But interesting comments from Steven Van Zant. He basically came out and said that we are no longer in the mainstream. It's not a part of mainstream culture anymore. The people who listen to rock and roll are basically a cult now. We're our own little cult. Imagine that. And you hear this music, coming out of car speakers at the stoplight, or you walk into, I don't know, pick a store in a mall anywhere, right? If you still do that kind of stuff. I rarely go out to the mall. I'm not I'm not up to date on the latest fashion trends, as you can kind of see here. But the point is, you walk into one of these stores and the music, whatever that is, that noise that comes out, it damages your DNA. And by the time you get out, you're like, oh, I need to detox. I need to do something to kind of rid myself of what I can't unhear what I just heard. And it's pretty rough. And Steven Van Zant, kind of going the way of Gene Simmons here, saying that rock is dead and there aren't any mainstream artists who are successful, like the Beatles, like the Rolling Stones, like Led Zeppelin. You can name a number of different bands from that era where those bands had super long careers. They left their mark on everything. And by the way, it's interesting that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is allowing stuff in that's really not rock and roll. And they won't admit that. They come out and they say things like, oh, well, we would like some diversity and some different styles. I'm sorry, Eminem? No. Eminem is what the culture wants now, but that's not rock and roll. And if you're going to say, well, we have to put in this as a style, which is an offshoot of, it's not really an offshoot of rock and roll. I mean, it's a stretch to say that. I mean, guitar, bass, drums, vocals, keyboards, you know what rock and roll is. Rock and roll started Bill Haley in the Comets, Elvis Presley, and that was your prototype. And then, of course, you had different hybrids of that, but it was, as Billy Joel would say, it was still rock and roll to me. That song actually has some good lyrics when it comes to describing all the different forms of rock and roll. And we've really lost it. We have truly lost it. That's why I'm a big fan of the Frontiers music label. And I will tell people, hey, have you heard? I've got a bunch of CDs behind me that, I'm trying to showcase, and records, and just talking about artists. I just had this guy on with this group, City of Lights, and it's terrific music. If it got radio airplay and people were able to hear it on a regular basis in a format that presented itself well, that had the old stuff and the new stuff, and there wasn't any filler in there, it was just all really good stuff, then my guess is some of us old folks who are still wanting to hear this music, we would be pretty excited about it. But, the industry itself, I mean, Van Zant can just blame, changes in taste and so forth. But the industry made a decision back in the 90s to elevate really bad rock and roll, if you want to call it that, music that didn't have melody, where the vocalists all kind of sounded the same. That was the new template. You weren't going to have fun. You weren't going to hear optimism in music. And then you had the rise of hip hop and rap. And a lot of people who just didn't think rock was cool or could listen to it went over to R&B and dance music. And some forms of R&B are fantastic, and they certainly belong in the genre. But I think something really went awry when hip hop became just its own category. And, other than sampling some of the stuff that came before them, it has really very little to do with Bill Haley and Chuck Berry and all that music. It just isn't relatable there. So there are bands out there. Dirty Honey, I talk about them every so often. Greta Van Fleet, and then all of these bands that I listen to over on the Frontiers label. There's this new band, Skills. I don't know if you've heard of Skills. Night Ranger guys, Mr. Big guys. It's going to be awesome, but is anybody going to listen to it? Is radio going to play it? It would be a headline again on some classic rock website to tell us what's coming, but are they going to play it? Of course not. They won't play it. I mean, everything has been programmed where it's just pathetic, boring, repetitive. I mean, I've said this in a number of videos. There's no variety. There's no just interesting personalities, really. In those days, man, there are all these different characters and your image, but you did have to create really great art to go along with a personality. Some people like a more subdued person, somebody who's not just trying to be a showman, but somebody who just plays their instrument really well or sings really well and is humble and just a regular person. And that was rock and roll. Today, it's all about image, and the image, again, creates this cult of personality, talking about cults. But if rock and roll is a cult, according to Steven Van Zant, then count me in. Count me in. I will keep the torch lit. The people I talk with, I interview people all the time, and we have great conversations. And we're all in agreement that we need to do this. We need to keep this going. So again, to all the YouTubers that talk about rock music, even if you've got like 50 subscribers, I mean, just keep going with it. Keep talking about it. I mean, because we're up against a very big avalanche. It's like you just have to keep going. You could see the avalanche coming at you, but the only thing you can do is keep plugging away. And, spread the word, tell your friends. I know that's kind of repetitive, and it kind of seems like it just isn't making much of a difference. And yes, you can go back and listen to your old stuff, but the problem was we didn't keep moving forward. When all that other music came along, there wasn't like one record label willing to say, look, we're going to spend money on this and we're going to keep this going, because we believe the last 3 decades weren't an anomaly. Okay. Steven Van Zant seems to think that rock was an anomaly, like it just happened and it was bound to fail as soon as it started. I don't know. I just don't see that. I think the culture changed. Some people would say rock and roll was a corruption of all the great jazz and big band music and swing music and all the stuff we had prior, and then even the classical music, right? And yeah, there's a high degree of culture in all of those formats, and rock and roll can embody some of that, but it's certainly more of a freeing and liberating style of music, and it's not boring, right? And it's fun, or it used to be fun to drive to and listen to, but we're in a post rock and roll era, according to Steven Van Zant, and Gene Simmons, and all of these characters who at one point were really on top of their game. Of course, being in the E Street Band in the early to mid 80s. Yeah. The world was your oyster. And Kiss, I would say back in the late 70s, really during their prime. I think that was a time that really can't be duplicated for a band like Kiss. And at least they kept plugging away. Recently, of course, they're lip syncing and they got music tracks playing, click tracks, any kind of enhancement they can get out there to put on their show. But are people coming for the show? Or are they coming for the music? And maybe Gene Simmons is just this really smart businessman who doesn't know much about the medical world. But in any event, I'll cut him some slack on that and say, if he'll just stay in his lane, he's okay. But anyway, I don't know what is coming, but I can tell you that it's probably less rock and more of what you've been hearing. There's no end in sight to this. And like I say, it would take some deep pockets. It would take somebody who wanted to revive or restore the format, and you would have to do terrestrial radio. Can't just do satellite radio. You got to do real radio stations, and you have to have real live DJs that know what they're talking about. I mean, you have to go completely against the grain. You can't just run a radio station to be a public service announcement machine or a community calendar events machine. People listen and they want to know what they just listened to. And that goes for the old stuff too. Just humor us. Just say that was Steely Dan, whatever. Just say, make us feel as though, yeah, this music is not just background, because now it's kind of like, this is our product. This is Cool 102. This is what we do. We play this format and we talk a little bit and we play the music, but we don't talk about the music. And all of that over the last 20 or 30 years has really contributed to the decline of the rock and roll format. So I don't know. I agree with Steven Van Zandt to some degree. I don't like his language on this, but are we a cult? I don't know. I hope not. If we're a cult, then what's everybody else? You know what I mean? Cult of personality, cult of culture. I mean, if I'm a music cultist, then so be it. I will take that label and wear it proudly.